So in the 2014-15 season, the Bulls had high hopes of being in contention for a title. Derrick Rose was finally back after having two major injuries that had him out of the lineup for 2 straight seasons. Noah was still an all-defensive player. Jimmy Butler was making huge leaps in his performance every season, and actually he won the Most Improved Player of the Year award that season. And the Bulls had brought in veteran Pau Gasol as a free agent who, although still a great player, he was past his prime. And then on top of that, the Bulls finally brought over their draft and stash rookie in Nikola Mirotic and drafted up, or traded to draft up, to get Doug McDermott, which we all know didn't work out, but another three-point sharpshooter. On paper, this team looked poised for bringing the franchise their 7th championship. The Bulls, although had some struggles during the regular season, they ultimately won 50 games, which was good enough for the 3 seed in the East. But they ran into LeBron James in the East semis, and despite an unforgettable buzzer beater from Derrick Rose in Game 3, the Bulls ended up losing the series in 6 games. The Bulls then fired Tom Thibodeau and brought in Fred Hoiberg with that same roster, but the team performed even worse under Hoiberg the following season by missing the playoffs entirely. Rose was then traded to the Knicks. They let Noah walk in free agency, as well as Gasol, and the rest is history. Ultimately, a franchise's goal is to win a championship, or at least to construct a team that is positioned to win a championship. And that's what I want to talk about today, and what the Bulls need to do in order to become title contenders in the near future. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. After seeing the Bulls win 3 straight games and starting to make significant shifts in terms of their performance and seeing the potential of this team given the young talent they have, it got me thinking of the future and what the Bulls need to do in order to get back to being in the thick of it and contending for a title. The Bulls signaled a rebuild after they traded Jimmy Butler in 2017. Although the Bulls have made some nice moves and drafted some nice players, they still have yet to make the playoffs since then. And obviously, the goal of any rebuild is to get back in contention at some point and not just be in rebuild mode year after year. The Bulls are on year 4 of this rebuild, and it's getting to be time that you start to see a return on those assets you've started building to get into contention. Now, obviously, there are a number of different scenarios the Bulls could go in terms of bringing this team back to title contention. But for the sake of time and giving a host of options and scenarios, I'm just going to focus on one that I feel is realistic but also puts the Bulls on the fastest timeline for contention. So the Bulls actually have a solid young core as it stands right now. I mean, looking at the starting lineup alone, you have Coby White, 20 years old, LaVine, 25, Patrick Williams, 19, Markkanen, he's 23, and Wendell, who's only 21. That is a very young starting lineup, and the good thing about what the Bulls have now are great veterans coming off the bench. But realistically speaking, as great as the Bulls veterans have been, they likely are not part of the Bulls' long-term plans. Garrett Temple, Thaddeus Young, Satoransky, Otto Porter, they have all been great pieces off the bench for the Bulls so far this season, but at their age, most are on expiring deals. We can assume they're not in the Bulls' future plans, or at least not all of them anyway. Now, as we all know, in order for a team to be a championship contender, you need a superstar, a franchise player, a number 1 option. And we've debated multiple times on this channel whether LaVine is that guy for the Bulls. And I've said multiple times on here that he is not. However, based on his most recent play and actually playing smart basketball, taking better shots when they come to him, getting his teammates involved, making them better players, and being a solid playmaker, he actually could prove me wrong and show that he is capable of being the leader of this team. So I'm changing my tone for now, and I may have to make a separate video on that, but for the purposes of this video and creating a roadmap for the future of the Bulls, I'm going to say the Bulls build around LaVine as their future star. I'm still not 100% sold on LaVine being that guy for this team because I want to see him consistently play well as he has been for an extended period of time, and my hope is he doesn't relapse into the hero ball player we used to see from Zach. And if he can continue on this pace, he will be a player the Bulls can build around, with other star pieces, of course, but he can be that player we build around. So I just wanted to establish that from the get-go before we go into what the Bulls will need to do with the rest of their lineup going forward. Now, I've said before, my prediction at the start of the season, which I made a video about, was for the Bulls to make the playoffs this season as the 8th seed. Now, if the Bulls are able to do this, or even better, that sets them up in a good position to start attracting other free agents. I know a lot of people have been talking about how the Bulls should go through another year of tanking to get Cade, but I'm not a fan of tanking. I actually think it's a very poor strategy in general. I might have to make a separate video about that because it really gets on my nerves whenever people talk about the benefits and the strategies of tanking. But the Bulls have been tanking for a while now. We've seen season after season as us being one of the worst teams in the league, and I'm tired of seeing my team lose all to get unlucky in the lottery, with the exception of this past season, of course. So if the Bulls can make the playoffs, they'll likely get bounced out of the first round if they play a team like the Bucks, Nets, or Celtics, but it signals to the league that if a team that young can make the playoffs, they are on the up and up. Now, the 2021 free agency class has all but dried up. The main prize and really only one at this point is Kawhi Leonard. And although I would love to I would love to have Kawhi on this roster, it just isn't realistic. Kawhi is not going to leave the Clippers to go play for a rebuilding team, even if they make the playoffs as an 8 seed. But rather than the Bulls viewing this as a missed opportunity to bring in big names, max players, the Bulls should now view this as an option or an opportunity to potentially bring in some lower paying free agents, use some of that cap space that you were hoping to give to one max player and use that money on 2 or 3 other free agents. That could be great pieces or role players on the team to go along with the young core. I would love it if the Bulls brought in a guy like Will Barton to come off the bench behind Zach LaVine. Now, Will Barton does have a player option, so that could be off the table before you know it. He averaged 15 points per game last season and was a key contributor to the Nuggets' success. On top of that, he's someone Arturas is already familiar with. Now, another guy I would bring in, and I know you guys are probably going to think I'm crazy and attack me in the comments, but hear me out, there is a reason for it. I think the Bulls should go after one of Andre Drummond or Tristan Thompson in free agency. Now, Thompson also has a player option, so he may not end up being available or becoming a free agent. Drummond will likely want to get paid more than what he's worth, and I'm sure some team will give it to him. So my hope is the Bulls can get Tristan Thompson, although I think Andre Drummond is a better player, but not at the salary that he's going to want. So my hope is the Bulls get Tristan Thompson on a cheap deal and really bring in Thompson because the Bulls are in need of a true center. And before you all say, well, what about Wendell? Let me preface it by saying the Bulls are going to need to figure out who they're going to choose between Lauri Markkanen and Wendell. And I know some of you will say, well, why can't they just work together? It's been working now. And yes, that's fair, but the Bulls need a true center. And Wendell is too undersized for that role. So with the Bulls bringing in Tristan Thompson, rather than having Wendell come off the bench, it's going to make more sense to trade Wendell, as much as I like the guy. He's a young player who is a good player and has a lot of potential. But if I'm the Bulls, I'm prioritizing Lauri over him, as I do think Lauri's ceiling is higher than Wendell Carter's, especially with the way that Lauri's been playing lately. Now, I believe you could likely get a decent return for Wendell because he's young, a great defender, and decent on offense as well. And a team who is looking for a power forward that could really use him, that could be a good asset. But because I'm looking for the Bulls to go big and start contending sooner rather than later, I'm also going to include Coby White in a trade with Wendell. And that's because I'm going after Ben Simmons. I think Ben Simmons would fit perfectly on this Bulls team. I know he can't shoot. And I know that he's actually kind of having a down season so far this year, but he is just such a great playmaker, a strong slasher to the basket, and also an incredible defender as well. Ben Simmons, he's been in trade rumors for a while now, and it's been debated whether, he fits with Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris in Philadelphia. And I think it's time for Simmons to get a fresh start with a younger team who is in desperate need of not just a point guard, a floor general, and a defender. Of course, Coby White is not a good defender, let's be real. And guys, I actually really like Coby and Wendell. I think they have a lot of potential, and I've said it before on this channel. What I love about Coby is his desire to better himself as a player, always looking for learning opportunities, always working hard in the gym and studying film sessions. I love the guy's work ethic, but I do still feel he is better suited as a shooting guard, and I don't think he has the potential to be better or even just as good as Ben Simmons over the course of his career. Now, the problem with the trade is that the Sixers are unlikely to agree in a trade for Coby, White, and Wendell straight up. I think what's intriguing about this trade for them is that they're both very young and have potential. Coby gives the Sixers some shooting that they don't get from Ben Simmons. Wendell is also a solid big man and a good defender to pair alongside Embiid. But is it enough to move the needle? I would say no. The Bulls most likely would have to throw in a first-round pick, which is a pretty big haul. That's a lot for the Bulls to give up for Ben Simmons. But I would say if they're able to get a deal done, you go for it. However, I will say, like I said before, Ben Simmons has started off the season a little slow. He's been struggling in terms of his overall scoring. And then, of course, also the other uncertainty with Ben Simmons is his health and whether he can stay on the court without any major injuries. So it's possible the Bulls could likely get away with just trading Coby and Wendell for Simmons, as some people might view Ben Simmons and his trade value overall is a bit on the lower side, especially with his contract. But my guess is a pick would likely need to be thrown into this in order for the Bulls to make this get done, because Ben Simmons is an established all-star and all-defensive team player. And Wendell and Coby, although young and talented, they just aren't there yet. Again, it might be a lot for the Bulls to give up, but if you want to expedite the Bulls' path to contention, this is a great option. Because for the Bulls, they don't need to be as concerned about Ben Simmons and his shooting, because they already have Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen to spread the floor. They're great shooters, and even Patrick Williams is a decent shooter, which I think he'll continue to develop, especially that mid-range shot. And guys, can you imagine a backcourt like Simmons and LaVine working together? Simmons feeding LaVine, but also having great perimeter defense, something we don't see from Coby White. So with the trade for Simmons and the Bulls adding Tristan Thompson in free agency to replace Wendell at center, this puts the Bulls starting lineup with Ben Simmons at point guard, Zach LaVine at the 2, Patrick Williams at the 3, Lauri at power forward, and Thompson at center. And don't forget, I also mentioned Will Barton earlier. You have Will Barton that's also added in as a free agent coming off the bench. Now guys, I'm not going to go too in depth on the details of the salary cap space and how this fits, because it would take a really long time to go into all the particulars, and the video is already long enough as it is. But the challenge here is going to be, which players can potentially sacrifice some salary, because Ben Simmons is going to remain on his max contract, which is a little over $30 million a year. LaVine, his contract is close to $20 million in salary, but once his contract expires, which by next season he'll be on an expiring deal, he's likely going to command a max deal if he continues to play as well as he has. So that's 2 max slots right there, which the Bulls do have space for. But the challenge now is Markkanen. As we all know, he's a restricted free agent going into this summer, and my hope is the Bulls will be able to retain him. But what if a team offers a very large contract that the Bulls are forced to match if they want to keep him, or maybe they just don't even have the kind of money to be able to match what another team is offering? Then you also have Will Barton, getting him in free agency, which he's not going to command a max contract or even close to it, but he's a solid player and will require a decent payday. He's already making close to $14 million this year as it is. And then you have Tristan Thompson. He's making $9 million currently. And again, for both Barton and Thompson, this assumes they decline their player options and become unrestricted free agents. Otherwise, these options are moot, but we'll assume for the purpose of this video that they do. So with all of the salary commitments, it doesn't leave the Bulls with a ton of room to work with, although I'm sure Arturas will find a way to get some solid role players, rotational players on cheap 1 or 2 year deals, kind of like he did this offseason with Garrett Temple. Anyway, I think this lineup with the duo of Zach LaVine and Ben Simmons, great pieces that are still young and developing, and Markkanen and Patrick Williams, that really sets the Bulls up for success starting in 2021-22. Now, I wouldn't say that's potentially a title contending team right off the bat. Not only does it take a little bit of time getting adjusted to a new roster, but also it's still a fairly young team. But I think if you give this group of guys one season together, they develop together, grow together, going into the following season in 2022-23, that's a pretty solid contending team that you can build around with LaVine and Simmons in the peak of their primes, Markkanen heading into his prime, and Patrick Williams, who by then would be in his 3rd season in the league. Tristan Thompson would really just be, for the purposes of having a center that actually fits that role, who can get rebounds and is a good defender and rim protector. Again, a lot of this depends on whether the salaries are going to work, because certain players might be on expiring contracts or demand higher paying deals, depending on how they're performing 2 years from now and how long their contract terms are if they are actually signed in free agency by the Bulls. So example of Patrick Williams is knocking it out of the park and having a breakout rookie season, the following season, the Bulls might want to offer him a big extension on his rookie deal. A lot of it depends on what kind of money Markkanen is going to command in restricted free agency and whether the Bulls will be able to maintain him. So yes, there are a lot of hypotheticals and what ifs in this scenario, and I'm sure there are also things I'm overlooking. I'm sure some of you will call it out in the comments, but that's just because I'm a random guy on YouTube who likes to talk about basketball. I'm not a GM or an executive or an NBA insider who does that as their job, so please bear that in mind before you criticize me for all the inaccuracies or flaws in my roadmap for the future. Obviously, there's so much of this that is subject to change, but if things played out in this scenario as I just described, I think the Bulls could become title contenders in just 2 to 3 years under this core of Simmons, LaVine, Markkanen, and Patrick Williams. I would love to hear what you guys think though, or let me know what you would even do in terms of building the Bulls for the future. Also, let me know if you guys like these type of videos or if you just prefer more of the day-to-day updates, game analysis videos that I usually do. Let me know in the comments. And guys, this was a pretty long video and took me some time to prepare, so would always appreciate it if you hit the like button, only if you enjoyed the video though, of course, and subscribe as well if you like daily Bulls content, and I will catch you guys in the next one.